Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Let me get straight to the point and give it to you without any chaser. The United States Supreme Court just made Donald Trump the first king of America. And it also handed him a powerful weapon. And he's already aiming that weapon at the U.S. Constitution. In the case of Trump versus CASA, the court didn't just weaken birthright citizenship. They made it harder for any federal judge to stop, watch this, unconstitutional policies. Not legal or constitutional policies, but they made it hard to stop unconstitutional policies from spreading across the entire country. Now, here's what that means. If Trump signs an executive order that violates your rights, my rights, we better pray that we are one of the lucky plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit. Because if not, the courts may not be able to protect us. So I want to break all this down for you so that you can understand what happened, what it means, and why this case should deeply concern, even terrify anyone who still believes in democracy and freedom. Now, here's how it all started. Trump signed Executive Order 14092. Among other things, this order says that children born in the United States to undocumented immigrants or even people here on temporary visas, those children are not U.S. citizens. He claimed that those children are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, so they don't qualify for birthright citizenship under the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now pause for a second. Take a deep breath. That is a direct attack on one of the most important Supreme Court cases in American history. I've covered this case several times in previous videos. It is the case of the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, and it was decided way back in 1898. And it made it very clear, crystal clear, that if a person or child is born on American soil, that child is a citizen, unless the child's parents are foreign diplomats or aliens of a hostile nation. That's it. But Trump ignored that. And several families that were impacted by his executive order sued. And they sued immediately because they had to. That executive order was due to go into effect pretty quickly. So here's what happened next. Several district courts, federal district courts, reviewed Trump's executive order, and they blocked it. And they blocked it with what are called nationwide or universal injunctions. And that means the courts didn't just protect the people who filed the lawsuit, but they stopped the executive order from taking effect anywhere in the country. This is a legal tool used in high-stake cases. It's been used to stop immigration bans, discriminatory policies, and yes, even conservative groups have used it during the Obamas or Biden's presidency. In this case, the appellate court upheld those injunctions. So Trump took his case to the Supreme Court. But here's what's wild, folks. He didn't ask the court to rule on whether his executive order is unconstitutional. Instead, he asked them to rule that nationwide injunctions are unconstitutional. So he avoided the bigger issue on purpose. And that was because he knew that his executive order was likely unconstitutional because of the Wong Kim Ark case. Yet what did the Supreme Court actually decide and not decide in this case? Well, to answer that question, let's go over and read a little bit of the case. So right at the very top, highlighted, it says, the application do not raise, and thus we do not address the question whether the executive order violates the Citizenship Clause or Nationality Act. The issue before us is one of remedy, and that is whether under the Judiciary Act of 1789, federal courts have equitable authority to issue universal injunctions. So what was before the court was that question, whether district courts could issue universal injunctions. And notice she specifically says, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who wrote this opinion, that the question of whether the executive order violates the Citizenship Clause or Nationality Act was not before the court because the Trump administration did not put that in their applications for the injunction. They did not want the court touching that issue. Instead, what they really wanted was for the court to say universal injunctions that were stopping his agenda are unconstitutional. That's what they did. And that's exactly what SCOTUS did. SCOTUS ruled that district courts cannot issue universal injunctions. In other words, if you sue the federal government, the judge can only protect you if what the government is doing still impacts the country. So their opinion will only be relevant to you, not anyone else. The exception to that is if your lawsuit is certified as a class action lawsuit. So basically this means there are no blanket rulings that stop a bad federal, even unconstitutional or illegal policy. Not on a nationwide basis. And this is a major, major shift. Justice Barrett, again, who wrote the majority opinion, she gave 5 reasons for her decision. First, she said universal injunctions didn't exist under English common law. That was the law that was in place long before the country was founded here. Second, she said the Judiciary Act of 1789 never gave federal courts the power to block policies nationwide. And it is the Judiciary Act of 1789 that created Article 3 or federal courts in the first place. Third, she said, universal injunctions are modern inventions, and they're not rooted in historical practices. I think the first one was issued probably around the early 60s. Number 4, she said that judges should only issue orders that apply to named plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And 5th, she said that giving plaintiffs complete relief does not mean giving them universal relief. So now a judge's ruling is limited to that specific plaintiff. And I know that sounds reasonable on the surface. You may be saying, what is wrong with that? Well, in reality, it's extremely dangerous for our democracy. So let me walk you through what this really means. Not just what it means on surface, but what it really means. Because the executive order Trump's executive order was only challenged in 22 states. And now it will take effect in 28 other states. So in those 28 states, in 30 days, a child born in those states will not be a citizen if their parents are in the country undocumented. But a child born in the 22 states that were covered by those universal injunctions will become citizens. So now we have basically two different Americas with two different definitions of citizenship. And that's just the beginning of the issues we now face. Because here's the bigger danger. If courts can't block an unconstitutional policy for the whole country, then Trump, and for that matter, any president, could do whatever they want as if they are kings. Because in every state where no one sues, that gives the president enormous power, and it severely weakens the court's ability to act as a check on executive power. So this ruling will result in rewards for bad, unconstitutional executive orders, executive actions. And that is just, again, the beginning of what will become basically a kingship. Why is that? Well, think about it. If Trump issues some crazy executive order, which is probably going to happen now, someone in, say, California files a lawsuit. You know how long it takes for lawsuits to go through the court system. And so in all the other areas of the country, Trump's executive order takes effect because the California judge cannot stop it nationwide. So it creates a chaotic system by design. And it, meanwhile, allows Trump's executive orders to take effect immediately, except for the place or places where there are lawsuits to try to stop it. Are you seeing here what's going on and why SCOTUS actually crowned Trump America's first king? Now, let me talk a little bit about Justice Sotomayor's dissent, because she called out Trump for his gamesmanship. All right, let me take you back over to the case. And she lays out why this was so, if you will, deceptive for most Americans. But as I've told you so many times, this whole thing was well planned out. They have been working on this plan, this scheme for years. And SCOTUS is a part of the conspiracy. That is obvious. And when I say SCOTUS is a part of the conspiracy, I'm talking about those 6 conservative justices. Here's what Justice Sotomayor said. Right here's where I want you to read. Hold on. the one at the very top right there. The gamesmanship in this request is apparent, and the government makes no attempt to hide it. Yet shamefully, this court plays along. A majority of this court decides that these applications of all cases provide the appropriate occasion to resolve the question of universal injunctions and end the centuries-old practice once and for all. In its rush to do so, the court disregards basic principles of equity, as well as the long history of injunctive relief granted to non-parties. And she's right to point out that they use this opportunity because they have had opportunities to get rid of universal injunctions before, but they're doing it now as support for Trump's agenda. Because again, the court, those 6 members on the court, are co-conspirators to implement Project 2025. And remember, Trump put 3 of those folks on the court in his first term. Remember. So she calls it out. She said he deliberately avoided asking the court to review the constitutionality of his executive order because he knew it would have likely been struck down. Instead, he used the opportunity consistent with their strategy to go after the power of the courts themselves. Because who has it what branch of the government that has been slowing him down? The courts. Well, now that power has been taken from the courts. They can decide a case just based on the 1 or 2 plaintiffs and their case, their results, their orders now are limited to those 1 or 2 plaintiffs, unless it's a class action suit. While the rest of the country has to deal with Trump's executive order, even if it's unconstitutional. And Justice Sotomayor, she warned that this decision would lead to legal fragmentation all across the country. And basically, your rights will depend on where you live. And I cannot say it enough. I said it all last year. This is part of a larger strategy to promote Project 2025 with the ultimate purpose of protecting white supremacy. And it's based on Trump reshaping the federal government, basically. Consolidating power in the White House. And also eliminating many of the checks and balances that protect our rights and protect our democracy. So this ruling really, really helps them do that. And it's also the reason why Trump has tried to appear to be supportive of SCOTUS. And you remember on one occasion at the State of the Union address, he was overheard thanking John Roberts because he knew they were going to deliver big wins for him. Well, so far, this is the biggest win because it disables his number one nemesis, federal courts. And it gives him, therefore, more power, more executive power. And folks, it's only the beginning. Let's be real. This is not just about birthright citizenship. This enables Trump to do a whole lot of stuff that he's been trying to do since January 2025. With this ruling, he now can deport American citizens to anywhere for whatever reason. He can do it under this decision Because whatever citizen he deports, yes, their family can run the court, hopefully get a good result, but that only applies to that family. If he deports people, American citizens from around the country, that case would not impact them. Every one of these people would have to file their own lawsuits and hopefully get a good result. He also can strip away civil rights protections. You say, well, yeah, but he can't. That's a law Congress passed. Well, declaring that children born of undocumented parents here who are not diplomats and who are not aliens of a foreign hostile nation are not citizens, that too is unconstitutional. He should not be able, in fact, legally, he's not able to just change the 14th Amendment like that. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He will still try to enforce his executive orders until someone goes to court and a judge says that's unconstitutional, you can't do that. But that will only apply to that person. Everybody else that he does that to don't have that protection. Are you getting it? I mean, he could do something like declare just before the time to go to the midterm votes, to vote in the midterms, he could say, okay, there are no more, I'm not letting any more voting. Now, how unconstitutional is that? Extremely. And usually we could stop that by going to a court, somebody file a lawsuit, get a judge to issue a nationwide injunction. Not anymore. Not anymore. So let's suppose he says with his executive order, again, the day before, we are to vote in the midterms. No more voting. And somebody files a lawsuit. Well, first of all, it's going to take some time for that lawsuit to be heard, even on an emergency basis. It could be heard on an emergency basis within a day or so, but it only applies to that person. The rest of the country could still be affected and will still be affected if they're not also filing lawsuits wherever they are. I'm not trying to scare you, but I saw this day coming last year. I made so many videos on this. I warn you, don't do it. Go with Kamala no matter what. Go with Kamala. I don't care what you think about her, whether you think she's black, whether you think whatever. Go with Kamala because she would not do this. And besides, going with Kamala was a good idea, period, just based on all the stuff that she and Joe Biden did for black people. And speaking of black people, Trump could say, you know what? There's no more civil rights enforcement, no more federal protections in housing, voting, education, economics, environment, and anything else to protect blacks. He's already trying to do it. But that stuff is being challenged in court. So now, even those cases that are pending in court to try to stop him will not impact anyone other than the named plaintiffs in those cases. So he can do all of this while federal courts stand by powerless to stop him on a nationwide basis. And if you think I'm making it up, let's go back and read some of what Justice Sotomayor and Justice Jackson says about this case and its ruling. All right. No right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. no right is safe. No right is safe now that the court has handed down this case. She says today the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people of certain faiths from gathering to worship. Now, she used those two examples to try to get those folks on the right's attention, to try to get those conservative people on the court to say this could be used against you next. But here's why I don't think it really mattered to them. I don't think this matters to them because, folks, I really don't think that they are empowering the executive branch and giving Trump all of this power and authority to then allow it to be used by Democratic presidents through another election. I try not to get on the mic in front of the camera and sound the way this sounds. I try not to do it. I try to give you hope and so forth. But this case is bad. This case is bad. I have been concerned for months when the court gave Trump absolute immunity. I said, now, why would they do that? I said that to myself. Why would they do that knowing that another election could give the next president all this power and authority? So it just caused me to think perhaps they are seriously thinking that, you know, conservatives will one way or another be presidents of the country and kings and all of that. I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully there will be a midterm election. I'm holding out hope. But with cases like this, I tell you, my hope is fading. I'm still holding on to it. But she goes on to say, the majority holds that absent cumbersome class action litigation, courts cannot completely enjoin even such plainly unlawful policies unless doing so is necessary to afford the former parties complete relief. That holding renders constitutional guarantees meaningful in name only for any individuals who are not parties to a lawsuit. Because I will not be complicit in so grave an attack on our system of law, I dissent. And the way she said I dissent is telling, because the court tries to respect decorum, and typically she would say I respectfully dissent. But she left that out. And remember this, even if there are more elections, future presidents can use this same strategy. So let's say there are elections, and let's say J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump Jr., someone like that becomes president. They still will have this power. Because, as I've explained, if district courts can't block harmful policies across the country, then the White House becomes a monarchy, a kingship. And that is one of the greatest and gravest concerns that those of us who practice the law and understand the Constitution have ever since Trump was elected the first time and now reelected. And again, if you think this is just me being hyperbolic, let's go back to the case law, and you'll see what Justice Jackson says about kings. So, right here at the top, it says, she says, the majority cannot deny that our Constitution was designed to split the powers of a monarch between the governing branches to protect the people. All of this is in this case, Trump v. Casa. Justice Jackson goes on to say the founders of the United States of America squarely rejected a governing system in which the king ruled all. They were trying to escape that, folks. And all others, including the courts, were his subordinates. In our constitutional-centered system, the people are the rulers, and we have the rule of law. She goes on to say, make no mistake, today's ruling allows the executive to deny people rights that the founders plainly wrote into our Constitution, so long as those individuals have not found a lawyer or asked the court in particular manner to have their rights protected. This perverse, strong word, perverse, twisted, burden shifting cannot coexist with the rule of law. In essence, the court has now shoved lower court judges out of the way in cases where executive action is challenged, and has gifted the executive with the prerogative of sometimes disregarding the law. As a result, the judiciary, the one institution that is solely responsible for ensuring our republic endures as a nation of laws, has put both our legal system and our system of government in grave jeopardy. And I might add, Justice Jackson wrote a strongly worded dissent. So did Justice Sotomayor. But as I read the opinion, I noticed that Justice Amy Coney Barrett had really just disrespectful words for Justice Jackson. She said other things as well. I'm not going to go to the fact that she may have said those things about Justice Jackson because she's the first black female on the court. I won't go there. So I'll just say that she was responding to Justice Jackson's sharp criticism of Amy Coney Barrett's majority opinion since she wrote it. All right, but you deal with it the way you think you should. Come to the conclusion that you think you should. Anyway, despite Justice Jackson's very, very well-reasoned admonishment not to hand Trump a crown, guess what SCOTUS did? That is precisely what they did. They made him, in effect, now there's not going to be a crowning ceremony. He's not going to pick his, court. And I'm not talking about legal courts. You know how kings have their henchmen? Well, wink, wink. He's already done that, right? But there's not going to be an official King's Day. It's not like he's going to have a parade of the military marching down. Oh, wait. Oh, he did do that too. Wow. Man. But look, the bright side is he's not going to, just try to take over universities or law firms. He's done that as well. Wow. Folks, we're in trouble. But we still got time to fight. We still got time to organize. We still got time to try to educate people. We got time to mobilize. And it's more urgent than ever. You know why? Because SCOTUS made it where courts cannot save us as a nation. We can hope that one judge will rescue the Constitution. SCOTUS took that. So we, the people, we got to show up. We got to speak out. We got to vote like our rights literally depend on it, because they do. Don't you dare look at me closely, folks. Don't you dare continue listening to people who say voting doesn't matter, or that the Republicans and the Democrats are the same. Don't listen to those people. They are a huge part of the reason why we're in this mess. So please, share this video. Subscribe if you're not. Join the resistance. We need everybody fighting this fight because the unthinkable is happening right in front of our eyes. Right in front of our eyes. Our country is being transformed from the democracy that we have come to love to a kingship. What could become a dictatorship, an autocracy. All of that is happening right in front of us. And once again, the United States Supreme Court is a part, in fact, an enabler of this mess. So, I'm Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Always remember, and it's more important than ever, open your eyes and stay woke.